What would you do if your own sister stood up on your wedding day, not to cheer, but to shame you? That's what happened to me. But what she didn't know was that her insult would trigger a reveal so devastating it would silence an entire chapel and fracture the lies she'd built her life upon. My name is Grace Whitmore, and for most of my life, I was the sensible one. The quiet girl, the reliable sister, the teacher. And Candace was a storm in designer heels. Growing up in a small New Hampshire town, we shared everything a bedroom secret's late-night whispers about our futures. She used to trace her finger along the cracks in our bedroom ceiling and say, "One day I'll live in a place where the walls are perfect." I always said, "I just want peace." We were different even then. Candace dreamed of spotlights. I dreamed of libraries. She wanted yachts and champagne. I wanted quiet mornings and meaningful work, but somehow it never felt like a competition, not until it did. I still remember the first time I saw the shift. We were 17, sitting at our grandmother's kitchen table. The acceptance letters had come in. She got into NYU. I got into Princeton. That should have been a moment to celebrate together. But instead, Candace blinked at my letter and said, "Princeton, huh? That's impressive. For someone who doesn't even care about prestige." I laughed nervously. I just liked their English program. She smiled a tight, glossy smile. "Sure, but imagine if you tried a little harder, you could have had it all." From that day on, our paths diverged with sharpness. Hers shot straight into Wall Street cocktail hours and European getaways. Mine into classrooms, school budgets, and chipped mugs filled with strong coffee. She married Brandon hedge fund manager, tailored suits 10 years older. The Whitmore family treated it like we'd been knighted. I still remember my father whispering at her wedding, "She did it. She made it out." I stood by the punch bowl, clutching my gift envelope, pretending not to hear, but I did. That whisper stayed with me. It echoed every time Candace made one of her signature digs disguised as compliments. "You're still driving the Camry. It's so humble. You live so simply. It's inspiring, really." I smiled every time, nodded, sipped my water with lemon, never once fired back. But inside, I was keeping score, not out of spite, but out of a quiet building recognition that I wasn't invisible. I was just being overlooked. And that made me dangerous in a way Candace would never see coming. Because while she judged me for choosing smallness, I was building something she'd never understand, a life rooted in truth. Then came Daniel. I met him on a rainy Thursday at a cozy Italian restaurant just outside Boston. He was managing the floor, wiping down tables, greeting every customer like an old friend. When I spilled soda on my skirt, he didn't blink, just offered me extra napkins and a warm laugh. We talked for 2 hours after I finished my pasta. By the second date, I knew. He was steady, gentle, smart in the way that mattered, not flashy, but deeply grounded. I told Candace a month later. I still remember the way her mouth twisted when I said he's a restaurant manager. A manager like at Chili's. "No," I said, "it's a beautiful little place in Cambridge. Cozy. He runs the whole operation." She took a long sip of wine, then smirked. "Well, I hope he's passionate about lasagna." I felt my cheeks flush, but I didn't flinch. Because here's the thing, Daniel wasn't just managing that restaurant. He was Daniel Rafael Rivera, son of the late Rafael Rivera, founder of Rivera Hospitality Group, a quiet empire of restaurants, luxury hotels, and private dining clubs stretching across the East Coast. But we didn't tell anyone, not even my mother. Why? Because Daniel made a promise to his father on his deathbed. "I won't run a business I don't understand from the inside out. I'll start from the bottom, learn every job, and when I finally lead, I'll lead with humility." So he walked away from a corner office and picked up a grease-stained apron. No name tags, no LinkedIn titles, just real work. That's the man I fell in love with. That's the man I chose to marry. And that's the man Candace tried to humiliate publicly at the altar. The morning of our wedding was crisp golden early October in Vermont. We'd chosen a small chapel tucked between tall pines surrounded by warm-colored leaves. The pews were oak. The music was soft organ, every detail intentional, not grand, just us. I stood in the bridal suite veil, pinned, watching my reflection. My mother adjusted the curls behind my ear, her hands trembling slightly. "You look beautiful," she whispered. "And ready," I replied, trying not to cry, because everything in me felt full, not nervous, not unsure, whole. Daniel was waiting at the altar, and I was about to become his wife. I thought the hard part was over. But then, the chapel doors opened. The chapel was bathed in warm, light sunlight, filtering through stained glass, casting reds and golds across white oak pews. Daniel stood at the altar, eyes steady, hands folded, calm, just like always. The organ faded into silence as the pastor lifted his book. "If anyone here objects to this union, speak now or forever, hold your peace." And that's when I heard it. Click, 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 heels, sharp, measured, echoing down the stone aisle like a gavel in a courtroom. I didn't need to look. I knew that rhythm. Candace. She rose like royalty, her silk navy dress catching the light posture perfect, every move choreographed. And then she said it, loud enough for the back row to hear. "This is insane. You're making a mistake, Grace." Gasps. Somewhere someone dropped a program. Someone else coughed in disbelief. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came. Candace stepped further into the aisle. "You're throwing your life away." "On him," she pointed. Actually pointed. "He's a waiter, Grace. A waiter. You graduated top of your class. You could have had anyone, and you're marrying someone who spends his days cleaning crumbs off cheap tablecloths." She shook her head like I was the one embarrassing her. "I can't sit here and pretend this is okay." I didn't move. Neither did Daniel. He just squeezed my hand, a gentle pulse, a heartbeat. I turned to her. My voice didn't rise. My posture didn't shake. I simply said, "I'm marrying a man who knows what loyalty looks like. A man who treats people with dignity. That's not something money can buy." My father stood abruptly. "Candace, sit down." But she didn't. She turned to the crowd like she was addressing a courtroom. "I'm saying what everyone else is thinking. Don't come crying to me when you're clipping coupons in some shoebox apartment over a pizza joint." Murmurs rippled through the pews. And then Daniel did something only I could see. He leaned toward me slightly and mouthed, "Should we tell her?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Let her have her scene. Let her write her own downfall." Candace huffed, threw up her hands, and stormed back down the aisle like a queen in exile. The groan of the chapel doors behind her sounded like the end of an era. The pastor cleared his throat. "Shall we continue?" I turned to Daniel, smiled gently, and said, "Yes, please." The rest of the ceremony unfolded like a slow exhale. Without her presence, the air felt warmer, the vows deeper, the silence between the words more sacred. When we walked back down the aisle, hands clasped, there was a different energy in the room. Not just celebration, anticipation. People knew what Candace had said. They'd seen the scene, but they didn't know what was coming next. And neither did she. Outside, the breeze lifted my veil just enough to catch the scent of pine. Guests tossed dried lavender. Laughter bubbled awkward but grateful. My cousin leaned in and whispered, "That was something." Daniel opened the door to the vintage Rolls-Royce waiting by the chapel. "Nice rental," I joked. He smirked. "From my personal collection." I blinked. "Seriously? Might as well start the reveal with a purr," he said, stroking the walnut dashboard as the engine came to life. We slid into the leather seats, warm from the sun, and exhaled together. "Do you think she'll come to the reception?" I asked. He nodded without hesitation. "She won't be able to resist. She thinks she's won, but she doesn't know we're just getting started." As we pulled onto the winding road through the woods, the Vermont colors blazed around us, scarlet, amber, gold. "She has no idea what's waiting," I said. "But she will," Daniel replied. And with that, we drove toward the second act. The Rivera Grand Reserve wasn't just a venue, it was a statement. Perched atop a quiet bluff outside Boston, its limestone walls gleamed gold in the late afternoon sun. The building looked like it had been carved out of old European pride-arched windows, wrought iron balconies, and ivy trailing across marble pillars. Most people in our circles had heard of it, but very few had ever been inside. You didn't book the Rivera Grand. You were invited, or more accurately, vetted. That afternoon, the entire property was closed to the public, reserved entirely for us. As our Rolls-Royce pulled into the long, circular driveway, I could already hear the whispers. Wait, is this really where the reception is? This place is like Michelin star exclusive, right? How did they even get this? Did they win some kind of contest? Daniel smiled as he helped me out of the car, his tuck's perfectly pressed posture as relaxed as ever, but I could see it in his eyes. He was ready, not to gloat, not to humiliate, but to finally gently take off the mask. The doorman opened the massive glass doors with silent precision. Inside, the air was chilled and fragrant, rosemary, citrus, something floral I couldn't name. The floors gleamed marble white. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen galaxies above us. Servers in white gloves moved like shadows between silk-clad guests balancing flutes of golden champagne and trays of hors d'oeuvres that looked like art. And then, she arrived. Candace. 20 minutes late. Of course. She stepped through the entrance like she owned the place, pausing just past the threshold as her eyes scanned the space. The confusion on her face was instant and delicious. Her brows pinched, her lips parted. She looked around like someone had handed her the wrong script. This must be a mistake, she muttered loud enough for nearby guests to hear. They don't host weddings here. It's not even listed publicly. She spotted me across the room and beelined with forced poise. Grace, she said, that familiar tight smile on her lips. Sweetheart, what is this? Did someone pull some strings? Before I could respond, Daniel stepped beside me. No strings, he said evenly. Just family. Candace blinked at him like he'd materialized from nowhere. I thought you worked at Trattoria De Luca. I did. Still do sometimes. Great kitchen. Learned a lot there. So, this place, she asked, already shrinking slightly. Daniel gestured calmly. This is the Rivera Grand. Part of my family's portfolio. It didn't land right away. You could see her mind doing somersaults, searching for an angle that made sense. And then her face paled. Wait. Rivera. As in Rivera Hospitality Group. Before Daniel could confirm, a new voice entered the space. Daniel. Everyone turned. An older gentleman approached Kane, tapping gently, navy three-piece suit, pristine. His silver hair glowed under the chandelier light. He walked like he owned the marble beneath his feet. And in a way, he did. Alfonso Rivera, founder, patriarch, legend. Grandfather Daniel said, stepping forward with a rare grin. They embraced firm, respectful. And then Alfonso turned to me, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "So, this is the woman who finally convinced my grandson to stop hiding in kitchens." He turned last to Candace. His smile cooled instantly. "And you must be the sister." Candace stood frozen. I didn't know my grandson was just a server, I believe you said." Her eyes widened. A champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. No one moved to help. No one gasped. They were too busy watching. Candace opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "I was just trying to protect her," she murmured. "I thought you thought his job defined his worth," Alfonso said, cutting her off. "It's a common mistake, but a shallow one." She stood there, cheeks flushing every inch of her expensive outfit, looking suddenly like paper-thin armor. And then Daniel stepped forward. "Stay," he said softly. "Eat. Dance. Be here. If you're willing to see people for who they are, not what they do." That line, simple as it was, sent a ripple through the room. Even some of our distant relatives blinked in stunned silence. Candace swallowed hard. "After everything I said." That's exactly why Daniel replied gently. And for the first time in my life, I saw Candace. Truly unsure of herself. No script, no comeback, just stillness. I stepped beside Daniel, wrapped my arm around his, and nodded toward the reception hall. "Shall we?" I whispered. He smiled. And as we walked, I looked over my shoulder. Candace stood alone, posture cracked eyes, glossy heels suddenly too high for the floor beneath her. And that was only the beginning of the reckoning. 10 months passed, long enough for the gossip to die down, long enough for the social media posts to fade, long enough for everyone to forget what Candace said at the altar. Everyone except her and us. Daniel and I had settled into our life like a well-worn coat, comfortable, intentional. Despite his inheritance, we chose to live simply a modest brownstone near Boston Harbor ivy on the bricks windows that caught the golden hour just right. He spent his days moving through Rivera properties, not as a CEO perched in a glass tower, but as a presence. He shook hands with vendors, taught line cooks how to sear duck breast, asked dishwashers how their kids were doing. He was never interested in status, only service. And I kept teaching. My classroom was still filled with chipped desks and Sharpie graffiti, but I loved it. I taught the kids who didn't always get heard, who didn't see themselves in Shakespeare or Steinbeck until I showed them they were in every single line. We lived quietly, but underneath that quiet, we both sensed it. Candace hadn't spoken her last word. It happened on a Thursday night, 11:40 p.m. The rain outside was relentless, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. Daniel and I were curled up on the couch, his laptop glowing faintly, the last of our tea, cooling on the coffee table. And then a knock. Not a text, not a call, just a knock. I opened the door and saw her. Candace, hair soaked, mascara streaked, one stiletto in her hand, the other still on her foot. She looked like a woman who'd run through a storm and lost a war along the way. They're taking everything she whispered, the house, the car. Brandon's under federal investigation, insider trading, fraud. Her voice cracked on that last word, not from shame, from shock, like she still couldn't believe it was real. Daniel appeared behind me silent, his expression unreadable. We didn't say anything, just stepped aside. She entered the living room like a guest in her own memory, awkward, stiff, unsure of the furniture. "I don't know what to do," she said, hands clenched in her lap. "I've never..." Started over. Her voice broke again, this time softer, smaller. Daniel closed his laptop and leaned forward. "There's an apartment above one of our smaller restaurants in Cambridge. It's clean, safe, simple." She looked at him stunned. "You'd let me stay there." I sat down beside her, calm, clear, on one condition. She tensed. "You work," I said, "not in an office, not behind a desk. You do what Daniel did. You start where he started. You want me to wait tables?" "Worse," I said, not unkindly. "Dish pit, prep line, mop, cut your own lemons." Her eyes widened like I'd just slapped her. But I wasn't trying to punish her. I was offering her something no one in our family had ever offered her before, a way out that required honesty. She stared at me for a long time. Then, "Okay," she whispered, "I'll do it. I don't know how to be good at anything real." Daniel stood offering a hand. "You'll learn," he said. We all did. She moved into the apartment a week later. 2 suitcases. No assistant, no housekeeper, no pre-approved furniture delivery. On her first shift, she dropped a tray of glasses, shattering 8 of them, then fled to the walk-in freezer and cried until her mascara left black streaks on the lettuce bins. But she came back the next day, and the day after that. No one clapped. No one gave her gold stars. But the sous chef noticed she stayed late to clean the grill. The host noticed she started learning the regulars' names. And the dishwasher, a 17-year-old kid named Malik, noticed that she always brought extra gloves without being asked. Humility doesn't arrive with thunder. It seeps in, quiet and persistent, until you stop checking mirrors and start looking people in the eye. And slowly, Candace started to change. But she still didn't know the full story, because buried in her husband's laptop left behind after his arrest was a folder labeled Backup, NYC. Inside emails, voice memos, one to her, a voice recording from Brandon. If Grace marries into that Rivera family, everything changes. You think they'll let her stay small? She'll outshine you, outmaneuver you. Just say something, ruin it before it gets too far. Candace sat on the apartment floor that night, earbuds in phone, trembling. He hadn't just manipulated the markets, he'd manipulated her. Pushed her to sabotage her own sister's happiness, not because of concern, but out of control. The next morning, Candace showed up to the restaurant early, hair pulled back, apron already on, not a trace of gloss. And she worked, not for redemption, not for forgiveness, but because she finally understood the cost of pride. 6 months later, I visited the Cambridge location just before the dinner rush. It was a Friday. The air smelled like rosemary and garlic butter. Pans clattered. Orders flew. The kitchen buzzed with the kind of focused chaos that only happens when everyone knows their role and trusts each other to play it well. And there, at the pass, was Candace. Hair pulled into a tight bun, apron slightly stained, pen tucked behind her ear. Her once manicured hands now bore the signs of real labor burns, calluses, a small scar above her knuckle. But she moved like she belonged. Fire table 12, swap the veal to halibut, and someone please check the temperature on the creme brulee. I'm not serving soup in a ramekin. The kitchen responded not with sarcasm, not with eye rolls, but with respect. She noticed me just as she wiped her hands on a towel. Her face softened. "You came early," she said. "Wanted to see you in action." She smiled genuinely, not the old performative smile, not the one she wore to galas and fundraisers. This one was quiet, earned. "Give me 5 minutes to close out the orders," she said. "Then I'm yours." I sat at a side booth and watched. I watched as Candace trained a new server how to de-escalate a difficult table without losing her cool. I watched her slip a free appetizer to a single mom and her toddler in the corner. I watched her stay behind to mop a spill she didn't cause because the busboy was running behind. She wasn't playing a role. She was being someone new. Daniel slid into the booth beside me, arms folded, watching her too. "They trust her," he said softly. "She's earned it." After her shift, we pulled her into the corner booth with us. Daniel took a breath. "So, how would you feel about managing this place?" Candace blinked. "Me. You know the system, the people, the work, but..." I dropped a tray my first day. "And you came back the next," I said. "That's the part that matters." She stared at us, emotion rising in her throat. "I never thought I'd love this, but I do. I love the rhythm, the honesty, the realness of it." She glanced down at her hands. "You know, I used to think success meant being admired, having people talk about you like you were special. But now I get it." She looked up. Her eyes were glassy. "Now I know success is being respected for who you are, not what you wear." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You built this, and it suits you." 2 months later, she stood in front of the staff for her first manager's meeting. Her posture was solid. Her tone was clear. "We do things right. We do things fair. And no job is too small, not even for me." And no one laughed. Not even the cynical pastry chef. At the next family gathering, a fall dinner at my aunt's house, Candace showed up wearing her Rivera uniform. Black button-down black jeans, her name tag clipped to her pocket. No designer dress, no glossy curls, no air of performance. And for the first time, no one commented on it. Because it wasn't a costume, it was armor, earned in sweat, silence, and second chances. She helped in the kitchen, washed dishes without being asked, sat beside our youngest cousin and asked about their college essays. And when my mother hugged her at the end of the night, there was no awkward tension. Just two women learning how to love each other again without conditions. Later, as we stood by the coat rack, I leaned in. "You proud of yourself?" I asked. She smiled. This time, no hesitation. "I finally feel like myself." And I didn't even know who that was until I lost everything. 1 year later, I stood outside a renovated storefront in Somerville, Massachusetts. The brick facade had been repointed, the windows replaced the Rivera logo, etched tastefully in gold across the glass. Above the door hung a bold white banner. "Grand opening, Rivera Local Somerville Inside." Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. A small jazz trio played in the corner. Local press hovered near the bar, snapping photos of the staff. And in the center of it, all wearing a crisp black apron and a calm, focused smile, was Candace. Not Candace the socialite, not Candace the scene stealer, not Candace the whispering sister with wine-stained lips. This was a new woman, one rebuilt from sweat scars and second chances. When she spotted me, her whole face lit up. "You came," she said, breathless. "Wouldn't miss it." She took my hand and led me to the open kitchen window. Inside, a crew of young cooks hustled under hanging copper pans, and on the pass sat 3 elegant dishes locally sourced, beautifully plated, entirely hers. "I built the menu with the team," she said. "Everything's under $30. I wanted something working families could actually enjoy." I turned to her. "You thought of them first." She nodded. "Daniel taught me that. You don't build a legacy by climbing over people. You build it by lifting people with you." At 7 p.m., sharp Daniel and I stood beside her under the banner. A small crowd had gathered, friends, staff, neighbors, former teachers, a few reporters, even the sous chef from her first restaurant job. She stepped forward, cleared her throat, and held the ceremonial ribbon in both hands. 1 year ago, she began, "I lost everything I thought defined me, my house, my husband, my comfort. But what I found was something more valuable. I found honesty. I found the dignity of showing up. I found the people who gave me room to fail and the courage to try again." She paused, searching the crowd until her eyes landed on me. And I found my sister again. My throat tightened. "Grace, you gave me a lifeline when I least deserved it. You didn't shame me. You offered me work, real work. And through that, you gave me back myself." She turned to the ribbon, lifted the scissors, and paused. "Come cut it with me." I blinked. "Me?" "Of course," she said. "I wouldn't be standing here without you." So we did it together. One smooth snip, one loud cheer, and just like that, Candace Whitmore opened the doors to a restaurant not built on pretense or privilege, but on humility, on earned respect, on the ashes of a life once built to impress. As the night unfolded, I watched her move with ease between tables, joking with chefs, refilling drinks, hugging regulars from her Cambridge days who came just to see her fly. My mother pulled me aside at one point, tears rimmed in her eyes. "I didn't think she could change," she said, "but I'm so glad she did. She didn't just change," I whispered. "She chose to." Later, as the crowd thinned and the jazz trio packed up their instruments, Candace joined us at the back patio with 3 glasses of wine, one for me, one for Daniel, and one for her. She raised hers. "To second chances," she said, "and to sisters who never stopped believing, even when they had every right to walk away." We clinked glasses under the string lights, and for the first time since we were kids, lying on that creaky bunk bed in our grandmother's attic, I saw her again, my sister. Not the perfect version, not the polished one, just her. Raw, real, redeemed. Closing, reflection, and call to action. Some stories of betrayal end in silence, some in war. But mine ended with a ribbon, a restaurant, and a sister, reborn in Flour and Fire. So now I ask you, have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best? Have you ever had to let someone fall before they could stand? Tell your story in the comments. Let's lift each other messy, honest, and unfiltered. And if this story resonated with you, like, subscribe, and stay for the next one, because behind every perfect photo is a story someone tried to hide.